Life loves to throw up mysteries where even skeptics have to scratch their heads looking for an explanation. One of these great mysteries is the art of dowsing, where people use a Y-shaped rod to locate water, certain elements, or even missing people. Dowsers have also placed the rods over a map to locate a missing person, or in some circumstances, a missing body. Another common method of dowsing is to place a pendulum over a map, where it will spring either clockwise or counterclockwise to obtain a result. The following 3 stories will amaze you on how dowsers were able to locate people against all the odds, when on all other normal channels failed. Number 3. Ted Kaufman. Ted Kaufman had been dowsing for over 21 years and had assisted people to locate water, finding their lost pets, and in one case even helped someone find their missing passport. Ted's technique, as with most dowsers, was to use a stick in the shape of a Y, and he locates the water when the stick points downwards. Ted claims that the stick reacts to the minerals that are in the water and soil. However, Ted does not only use a dowsing rod when searching, but also uses a pendulum, where he will swing the pendulum over a map, and after clearing his mind, he will ask a series of questions, where it will spin clockwise for yes and counterclockwise for no. Ted has also assisted the police in locating missing people, and the most famous case occurred on February the 15th, 1981, when 2 men from Lake George, New York State, left a general store and started to drive home. The journey that should only have taken them about 20 minutes. However, the men completely disappeared along with their truck. A full search then ensued up until the spring of 1981, but the police and rescuers could find nothing and the situation had become desperate. The police decided to call in Ted, who proceeded to hold a pendulum over a local map and ask a series of questions. The first question was whether the men were alive, and the pendulum swung counterclockwise for no. And he then asked whether the men were in the US, and the pendulum swung clockwise for yes. And he then asked whether they were in the Lake George area, and it spun clockwise for yes. Ted first swung the pendulum over the map to obtain a vertical reading, and drew a line. He then swung the pendulum over the map to obtain a horizontal reading, and drew another line. Where the lines met, formed a cross. Ted said that where the lines crossed was where the truck and bodies were located, right in the middle of Lake Georgia. Because it was in the middle of the lake, everyone was skeptical and did not believe him, and chose not to follow up his findings. In April 1981, a body washed up on the shore, and the police again called in the help of Ted. On this occasion, Ted brought along his dowsing stick and went out into the lake with the police to help locate the remaining body and pickup truck. As it got to the centre of Lake Georgia, the stick started pointing downwards, whereas Ted said this was the location of the missing truck. They then dropped an anchor, and because Ted's readings were so accurate, the anchor actually landed in the back of the truck. We now ask how a pickup truck ended up in the middle of the lake. In February, the lake was frozen, and the men tried to drive across the frozen lake to take a shortcut home. Unfortunately, the ice was not thick enough. Number 2. Melody Nunn. In the early evening of May the 25th, 1999, Barbara Patry of Berlin, New Hampshire, was calling her 3-year-old son Cameron to come in for dinner. The dog came running, but Cameron was nowhere to be found. Apparently, Cameron had chased the dog into the woods at the back of their property. Where the dog had returned after hearing her calls, Cameron was still in the woods, and it was now dark. Barbara immediately called the police to notify them that her son was possibly lost in the woods, and the weather was getting very cold. The New Hampshire State Police, along with the Fish and Game Department, arrived a short time later with tracker dogs, where they not only checked the woods, but the neighbours' backyards and sheds, or any nook and cranny that the boy could have wandered into. They were searching late into the night and the temperature was rapidly dropping. Their concerns were that young Cameron had fallen over and was possibly injured or unconscious, and they were fearing he was now suffering from hypothermia. His mother now had grave fears for her son and was fearing the worst. Hours had passed and it was now morning, and Cameron had spent a whole night in the woods in almost freezing conditions. Helicopters and hundreds of townspeople were now involved in the search for Cameron, who had now been missing for 12 hours. With all of the manpower, tracker dogs and helicopters, they could not locate the boy, and things were looking extremely grim for young Cameron. A woman called Melody Nunn was driving to work and was listening to the radio as the drama was unfolding and believed she could help. Melody was a Native American and practiced dowsing, and she believed she had inherited the powers from her ancestors. On arriving at work, she bent some metal to create a dowsing rod and then held it over a map of the local area in the hope of receiving some sort of message regarding the lost boy, but with no luck. She then proceeded to the ranger station to use a more detailed map of the district, and with the help of the ranger, she held the dowsing rod over the map, closed her eyes, and asked a series of questions as to the whereabouts of the boy's location. Slowly the rods came together, and she asked the ranger to mark the area of the map where the rods had crossed. She repeated the exercise again and again, and even turned the map around, and the crossed rods continued to show the same location on the map. The ranger then took a copy of the map to the search and rescue team, telling them that a woman had come to him claiming she could help locate the lost boy. They were initially met with stony silence. The police were skeptical because they'd been receiving many calls from people claiming to know where the boy was located. Why should this be any different? However, one of the officers decided to punch the map's coordinates into his GPS tracking unit. They then proceeded to follow the coordinates, hoping that by some miracle, Melody Nunn's technique would locate the boy. As they were heading deeper into the woods, the foliage was getting thicker and thicker, and they feared they could walk over him and never see him. They also feared that this young 3-year-old would be so frightened that he would not even respond to their calls. Miraculously, the ranger came upon the small boy sitting on a rock, cold and damp, but still alive. Cameron had been in the woods for 20 hours and was still alive. After the rescue, the ranger went to Melody Nunn to tell her that they had located the young boy, and he was found in the exact location that she had marked on the map with her dowsing rod. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Number 1. Edgar Deveau. In 1960, Swiss dowser Edgar Deveau was asked to help locate a missing woman by the name of Mina, who had suddenly disappeared. The request was made by his sister Joanna, who was concerned for her welfare as she was having marital problems. Deveau was well known in the area in helping to locate missing people and lived in the village of Péry-Ruchonnet in French-speaking Switzerland. However, Mina's husband refused to go on the search to locate his missing wife, believing it was all nonsense. Joanna then gave Deveau a photo of her sister, whereas he held a pendulum over the photo of the missing housewife. Unfortunately, he told Joanna that he believed that her sister was dead and that she was in the water. Joanna then gave him a map to get the bearings of where her body could be located, and he then swung the pendulum from northeast to southeast. He then drew a line along the river and made a cross, and declared that her body is located where the lines are marked on the map, and her body is held under by a piece of metal. Joanna and her husband were initially skeptical, but still went to the police. Well, they too were skeptical and said she's probably run away. Fortunately, the local diving club were able to assist and proceeded to the part of the river that Deveau had marked on the map, and he accompanied them. One of the divers then located one of Mina's stockings, which his sister was able to identify as the same size and brand that her sister wore. Then one of the divers rose out of the water looking shocked and pale, claiming that he had touched a body, but because he had disturbed it, it had floated away in the current. They then proceeded to follow the course of the river, where DeVoe continued to use his pendulum to stay in contact with the body, but had to temporarily abandon the search because the path was now blocked by factories. A few days later, DeVoe had managed to track her badly decomposed body to a power station, where it was later discovered by an engineer. The body had now been in the water for 10 days and was found near the turbines of the power station. Without DeVoe's guidance, using his pendulum and map, the divers would not have been able to find the missing housewife's body.